It wasn't a silence of peace. No, it was the kind that lingered in old stone, soaked deep into moss-covered walls, and echoed beneath vaulted ceilings long after footsteps had faded. Werndale was ancient, beautiful, broken. Its spires reached toward the sky like fingers that had forgotten how to hold anything but pride. Below them, the people murmured of curses and shadows, of wars that ended in silence, of rulers who vanished, not from death, but from memory. Yet amid the pomp and prophecy, in the deepest fold of the royal grounds, lay a garden most had forgotten. Its hedges were crooked, its paths uneven. Wild roses tangled in iron trellises like veins across broken bone. The air always felt damp, as if time refused to dry here. And in the center of this neglected Eden moved a man, alone. A man no one noticed, a man everyone dismissed. He was called the groundskeeper. No one bothered with his name. It wasn't worth remembering. To the palace, he was just another shape in the morning mist, there to sweep fallen leaves, prune dead branches, and disappear before the sun reached the gates. His coat was always dusty, his beard unkempt. His hands bore more earth than skin. The servants mocked his silence. The nobles didn't see him at all. He walked past lords in golden cloaks and chambermaids with secrets in their pockets, and none turned their heads. To them, he was part of the scenery, like the old fountains or the moss on the stone lions. But he saw everything. He saw the archbishop whisper beneath the statue of the weeping saint. He saw the heir drop his dagger near the east wall, and who picked it up. He saw the queen's maid burn a letter before dawn, trembling, and he remembered every word, every secret, every lie. They didn't know who he was. They didn't know what he carried. And they never asked, because in places of power, the quiet are often mistaken for the harmless. Then came the 7th day of storm month. The sky hung low with gray, and the kingdom awoke to bells that rang far too early. The king was dead. No illness, no wound, just gone. His chamber was untouched. His guards swore they heard nothing. But when the high steward entered at first light, he found King Alaric IV lying cold atop silken sheets, eyes open, lips dark as dried wine. The court panicked. Whispers spread through the palace like cracks in glass. Poison, treason, a curse passed down through blood. And as the nobles gathered in frantic circles, wrapped in velvet and suspicion, the groundskeeper moved through the garden, unhurried, calm. He stopped beside the western rose bush, a plant that hadn't bloomed in over 20 years, not since the war, not since the fire. And there, beneath the pale light of a sickly morning, a single red rose had opened, full, vibrant, alive. The groundskeeper stared at it for a long while, as if reading the petals. Then, without a word, he plucked the flower with care and walked barefoot into the marble halls of the palace. No one stopped him. No one dared. He passed captains and courtiers, ghosts of memory flickering in his gaze, past the queen's trembling hands, past the council's wide eyes. He approached the king's lifeless body and placed the rose upon his chest, then turned and left, still silent, still unseen. But in that moment, something shifted in the air, a current, a crack, a question no one dared to speak. Because something about the way he moved, calm, precise, certain, unsettled even the bravest of men. He wasn't just a gardener, not anymore. And perhaps he never was. They called him a ghost, but ghosts don't remember pain. He did. Long before he tended roses and swept moss from marble steps, he wore a different face, a younger one, cleaner, one that belonged to someone who still believed in justice, in kings and truth. Before the silence, there had been screams. Before the earth, there had been fire. And before the garden, there had been war. 23 years ago, the gates of Werndale burned. The sky split with steel and thunder as the royal guard turned on their own. Blood pooled on sacred floors. Betrayal was etched into every blade. And amidst it all, a single boy ran through the smoke, barefoot, breathless, hunted. Not just any boy, he was the son of the first blade of Werndale, the heir to a forgotten line, noble not by title, but by oath. His name was Caelan Thorne, but no one remembers that name now, because it was erased, burned from the scrolls, struck from memory, buried beneath false history, sealed by trembling hands too afraid to face what they'd done. The boy had watched his father die with a sword still in his grip, watched his mother's blood stain the emerald banners she once embroidered with pride, watched the traitor prince Alaric crowned with stolen light. And then the boy disappeared. Dead, they said. A mercy, no body found, just ashes. But ashes can still burn. Caelan lived. Not by fate, not by chance, but by will. A will so fierce it kept him breathing through fever and rot, kept him moving through forests thick with wolves, kept him quiet when bounty hunters whispered his name by firelight. He learned to dig, to mend, to wait. The boy became the gardener, and the gardener became something more. He studied their faces. He memorized every secret entrance, every guard rotation, every weakness behind polished armor and perfect smiles. He learned what they feared, what they loved, what they could lose, and every petal he planted was a reminder. Every weed he pulled, a plan. Every morning he bowed his head and touched the soil. He whispered not prayer, but names. Names of the dead, names of the guilty. And one day, he knew they would hear him. Now the king was dead, and the rose had bloomed. The first sign, the first signal. The oath had been broken, and the time had come to collect what was owed. By sunset, word had spread through the palace. The crown seal was missing from the king's chamber. The ancient ring, forged from obsidian and worn by every ruler since the first flame, had vanished. No thief, no forced lock, just gone. That night no one slept. The court trembled behind velvet curtains. The nobles whispered of curses and rebellion. But deep in the west garden, beneath the roots of the oldest tree, Caelan stood barefoot once more, moonlight on his weathered skin, and held something in his hand, a ring, heavy, cold, real. The time for silence was ending. Tomorrow they would remember his name, not as a servant, not as a shadow, but as the rightful heir to the oath they broke. The groundskeeper was done waiting. Morning came heavy with fog, the kind of fog that made even the bravest guards grip their spears tighter. That swallowed sound, muffled breath, and made the stone halls of Werndale feel like the belly of some great sleeping beast. And within that hush, something shifted, subtle, silent, intentional. In the servants' wing, the palace bustled with forced normalcy. Maids scrubbed already gleaming banisters. Kitchen boys peeled fruit with shaking hands. And the head steward, old Mistress Alwyn, barked orders louder than usual, her voice trembling under its authority. No one mentioned the ring, not openly, but everyone felt its absence. It wasn't just a trinket, it was power, a crown worn on the finger, imbued with the first king's blood and the last king's curse. Its disappearance was more than theft, it was prophecy. And prophecies in Werndale always ended in fire. Kalen moved like mist through the garden paths, his back bent, his pace slow, hands stained with soil, eyes cast down. A man no one noticed, a figure so ordinary he'd become invisible. Yet this morning, every step he took mattered, because he was walking the route he'd memorized as a child, before the palace fell, before the betrayal, before he learned to hide in plain sight. 12 right steps past the lion fountain, 16 paces from the old armory wall, 3 stones loose in the eastern gate. Nothing had changed, and that was the danger. In the western atrium, just beyond the Queen's solarium, Kalen paused. A flower had bloomed that should not bloom in spring. The midnight veil, a rare jet-black rose bred only once by the royal botanists a century ago. It bloomed only in winter, only by command. He had planted it 6 months ago, alone, buried deep beneath the soil, watered by hand, hidden from every eye. Now it stood tall, dark and perfect against the morning mist, a message to himself, to the past, and to those who still watch from the shadows. Kalen kneeled before the rose, not in reverence, but in preparation. He removed a small knife from beneath his sleeve, old, rusted but sharp, and sliced his thumb across the tip. Let the blood drip into the soil, not much, just enough to stir the memory of the earth. Then he whispered the name of the man who'd killed his father. Elias Wren, captain of the guard, once noble, now lorded over the security of Werndale, like a vulture perched on a wounded deer. Kalen knew he'd see him tonight. By midday, rumors slithered through the court like snakes in tall grass. The royal council had been summoned. The high seer had been found weeping in her chambers, and Lord Elias Wren had doubled the palace watch. He knew, or at least he suspected, not who, not yet, records no eyes had seen in generations. But Kalen had the key, a simple twist of wire, a childhood passage remembered, a phrase once whispered in grief. May the soil remember what men forget. The lock gave way with a sigh, and history opened her mouth. He found what he needed in a bundle of leather-bound ledgers, cracked and yellowed, but alive. Each page held names, transactions, lies, gold paid in blood, titles exchanged for betrayal. Elias Wren's signature, next to his father's execution order, masked behind emergency measures. But more than that, he found the truth. His father hadn't simply fallen. He'd been offered, by allies, sold like a pawn, then erased. It wasn't a murder. It was a coronation of the wrong king. Kalen didn't weep. He hadn't wept in 20 years, but he stared at the ink long enough that his thumbprint blurred the truth into shadow. Then he tucked the ledgers beneath his cloak and disappeared, leaving the dust to settle again, undisturbed, as if nothing had moved. That evening, the whispers returned. A nobleman slipped on oil near the council stairs, yet no oil was ever found. The high seer's scribe claimed to see his own face replaced in the mirror by that of a dead prince. And Lord Wren's private sword, blessed, locked, hung with honor, was found stabbed into the ground beneath the traitor's tree. The same tree where Kalen's father had been falsely hanged. A message. No one claimed it. No one admitted they saw who left it. But every noble in Werndale suddenly looked over their shoulder when speaking, because now someone was watching. That night, as the moon swam behind torn clouds, Kalen met with Mara the Ashen, once royal spy, now palace laundress. Her face was aged by smoke, her eyes by secrets. They met beside the storm drain, where the river kissed the roots of the old palace oak. She spoke first. "Thought you were dead," Kalen smiled. "I was. Then why come back?" "Because I never left," she spat. "Your timing's cruel." He unrolled a scroll, sealed in wax, marked with the sigil of House Wren. Cruelty runs in the blood of kings. She scanned it, her eyes widened. Is this real? As the night, she tucked it into her apron, her hand trembling. Then it's begun. He nodded once, and she vanished into shadow. The court held a feast the next day to prove they were still in control. Laughter rang louder than usual. Wine flowed faster. Music played until the strings bled. But behind every toast was a tremor. Behind every smile, a flicker of fear. Because that morning, a letter had been found pinned to the throne room's blackwood doors. Not sealed, not signed. Just one sentence, scrawled in blood-red ink. The soil remembers. From a balcony above the banquet hall, Kaelin watched the nobles drink. He saw Lord Wren's hand shake. He saw the king's fake grin falter. He saw Lady Rena, the same who had spat at him as a boy, clutch her pearls when the fire snapped too loudly. And in that moment, Kaelin did not feel like a servant, not a ghost, not a whisper, but a king without a crown, yet with more power in his silence than the entire room combined. He descended the stairs, unnoticed, past guards who didn't see him, past eyes too full of themselves to look down. He returned to the garden, to the midnight veil, and pressed his palm against the soil. It pulsed, alive, ready. The oath was awake, and soon, so would the kingdom be. Midnight struck Werndale like a silent bell, not with sound, but with a stillness so absolute it scraped against the skin. The castle slept restlessly. The nobles tossed, sweat slick and haunted. The guards doubled their patrols but forgot why. Even the dogs whined in their dreams. Only Kaelin was calm, because he knew. The final piece was about to move. He walked the grounds with no torch. He needed none. The moonlight loved him now, slid down the marble columns and across the garden paths to greet his steps, as if it too had been waiting for the return. By dawn, the trap was ready. He'd spent the last 7 nights threading it through whispers and shadows. Mara had delivered the documents to key dissenters in the outer court. Knights who had lost fathers to Wren's betrayal, minor lords who remembered the old ways, and widows who still lit candles for the last true king. He didn't need them all, just enough to turn the tide when the moment came. The rest would follow, or fall. That morning, a summons echoed across the citadel. All court members, high and low, were to gather in the Hall of Reckoning. Unusual, unprecedented, unnerving. Lord Wren, of course, had called it himself. A final move to cement his claim, to crown his nephew officially, to smother the rumors blooming like fire among dry leaves. But as the nobles filed into the great hall, draped in their silks and guarded smiles, they found something unexpected. The black throne sat empty. The banners of House Wren had been torn in half, and at the center of the chamber floor was a shovel, stained with earth. Old, rusting, yet unmistakable, the groundskeeper's mark. A hush swept through the marble chamber. Then the doors closed, and Kaelin stepped forward, not in servant's garb, not in mud, not in shadow. He wore a simple black cloak, clasped at the neck with a silver oak leaf. The sigil of his father's line, thought lost. His voice when he spoke wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. You killed my father and buried the truth beneath lies. The court froze. Lord Wren paled. The king's cup slipped from his hand. Kaelin walked to the center of the hall. His steps rang like drums of judgment. You stole his crown, and with it, the soul of this kingdom. He knelt and touched the floor. The veins of the marble pulsed, faint, golden, old magic. royal magic. Gasps rippled through the chamber. The priest stepped back. Even the guards faltered. Kalen rose slowly, then threw a leather-bound book into the circle. The archive ledger. It burst open on impact, pages fluttering like wings, landing on the signature of Lord Wren, the one that ordered the hanging of King Theor, Kalen's father. You crowned yourselves in silence, but the soil remembers. Lord Wren stepped forward, trembling. You are no king. You are a gardener, a bastard born of whispers. Kalen tilted his head. Then slowly he reached into his cloak and pulled out a ring, thick, black steel, set with a shard of obsidian shaped like a root. He slid it onto his finger. The floor cracked, the banners ignited, and the stained glass window, depicting the false coronation, shattered from the inside. The court fell into chaos. Some screamed, some knelt, others ran, but too late. The earth itself rose to answer him. Vines erupted through stone. Roots snaked across marble, forcing lords to their knees. The walls pulsed like lungs remembering breath. The castle had chosen. Kalen stood still as the kingdom knelt. Mara entered the hall and tossed something across the floor. A golden crown, warped, scorched. Found this in the pyres, she said. Didn't fit on a liar's head. Kalen didn't touch it. Instead, he looked to the stained glass above, now broken, where his father's face once stood, erased by time, and he spoke once more. I do not want your throne. I want your truth. He turned to the hall. And you will give it to me, or the soil will take what you won't. The nobles knew then, the boy they had humiliated, the man they had ignored, the hands they thought only knew weeds and dirt, had been growing power all along, not beneath them, not behind them, among them. The oath had bloomed, and the crownless king had awakened. The hall remained deathly still. The vines had reculed just enough to let the nobles breathe, but not escape. Their silks were torn, their masks had slipped. No more titles, no more pomp, just fear, raw, bitter fear. Lord Wren stood at the foot of the broken dais, chest heaving, eyes bloodshot. But his sword, a gilded relic passed down through usurpation, never wavered. He pointed it at Kalen with a trembling arm. You've conjured tricks, darkness, witchery, but that does not make you a king. Kalen didn't move, didn't blink. He looked at Wren the same way one might look at a locked door. No, he said, it makes me what you feared I'd become. Then Lord Wren lunged. Steel sang. The court screamed. But Kalen didn't draw a blade. He stepped forward, just once, and the floor cracked beneath him. A surge of energy blasted outward from his feet, rippling through the room like a buried drum awakened. The sword in Wren's hand turned to rust midair. His armor split at the seams, falling like dead bark to the floor. The very ground had rejected him. Wren fell to his knees, panting, broken, bare. Kalen stood over him, and for a moment, the weight of generations seemed to settle into the air. I buried my father with these hands, Kalen said, voice low. And you made me dig deeper, through your lies, through your empire of dust, until I hit stone, until I hit truth. He held up the black ring. It shimmered with quiet power. You crowned yourself with blood. I was crowned with silence, but the roots remember who they belong to. From the balcony above, the high priestess stepped forward. She had been silent throughout, a shadow in white, but now she raised the ancient seal, older than any throne, and pressed it to her lips. Then she knelt, and behind her, the entire court followed, one by one, even those who hated, even those who wept, because something undeniable filled the air now, a rightness that burned deeper than fear. Lord Wren tried to rise, but the vines held his ankles firm. Mara stepped from the shadows, dagger in hand, but Kaelin raised a hand. "No," he said. "He lives." Gasps, whispers. Mara blinked. "You said justice." "And he will live to see it." Kaelin turned to the court. "Let him live nameless. Let him live in the ruins of the throne he stole. Strip him of title. Let him walk among the fields he scorched. Let him see what grows in the place of his lies." He turned to Wren, voice no louder than a breath, but it carried like thunder. "The last king you buried rose from the soil, and the next one will not need a crown." The vines released Wren, and he collapsed in silence. The torches dimmed, and above them all, the dawn broke through the shattered, stained glass, casting golden light across Kaelin's face, not like a spotlight, but like a memory returning home. The golden light of dawn continued to pour in, as if the heavens themselves had decided to grace Kaelin's long-fought path with their blessing. The broken stained glass sparkled, each shard reflecting the light like pieces of a shattered crown. The moment hung in the air, thick with the weight of what had transpired. The court, still kneeling, had forgotten the boundaries of time. There was no court now, only a collective breath that caught in the silence. Kaelin stood in the heart of the chamber, not as a conqueror, but as the truth incarnate. He looked down at Lord Wren, who now lay among the ruins of his own making, stripped of everything. His armor was a tattered remnant of a legacy that had crumbled to dust. But it was the emptiness in his eyes that truly spoke volumes. The weight of Kaelin's words hung over the room like a sentence. The nobles, the guards, even the priests felt the tremors of truth deep within their bones. "You believed you could hide your sins beneath the throne," Kaelin said, his voice steady but filled with a quiet fury. "But nothing stays buried forever. Not the king, not the man." A shift rippled through the room. Those who had once whispered of his weakness now understood what they had never seen before. His power didn't come from a crown. It didn't come from a title or from the wealth and decadence of the world. It came from something deeper, something ancient. "The earth knows its true rulers," he continued, "and I have only done what was always meant to be." At his side, Mara stepped forward, the dagger still in her hand, now lowered. She had once been Kaelin's ally by necessity, but now she too saw him for what he truly was. Not just the son of a dead king, but something greater. The storm that had been gathering in the shadows was now fully realized in him. She nodded, her eyes meeting his with a look of quiet respect. No more words were necessary between them. What they had been done for the kingdom, for the earth, for truth. But it was the moment Kaelin turned toward the empty throne, the seat of power that had been stolen, corrupted, and twisted, that the true weight of his transformation became apparent. The throne, gilded and tall, sat as an impotent symbol of all that had been wrong. The nobles had fought for it, the bloodshed, the betrayals, the false coronations. All of it had been for a seat that was now as meaningless as the empty space where a true king once stood. Kaelin walked past the throne, his cloak trailing behind him like the very wind itself had come alive. He did not sit. He would never sit. Instead, he raised his hand. His fingers brushed the air like a conductor commanding silence. And for a heartbeat, every single soul in that room, even Lord Wren, broken on the floor, was silenced. "Let it be known," Kaelin declared, his voice firm, clear, and eternal, "that I do not need a throne to rule. No crown, no title, no walls to protect me. I will reign, not by force, but by the truth that binds us all together. A wave of energy pulsed through the room, stronger now. The roots, the vines, the earth that had been silent for so long began to hum in resonance with his words. One by one, the nobles rose, their eyes no longer filled with fear, but with understanding. Even the guards who had once sworn to protect the usurper now felt the truth of what Kalen had become. The earth, the kingdom, the people, they had all chosen him. Lord Wren, lying in the rubble, didn't speak. His body trembled, not with anger, but with the realization that his reign was over, not because of Kalen's sword or fury, but because of something he could never have understood. Kalen was not a king by right of birth. He was a king by right of being, and the world had finally remembered. As Kalen stood at the center of the hall facing the court, facing the remnants of the old world, he felt something stir within him. Not joy, not vengeance, but a deep, lasting peace. The truth had been told, and that truth would shape the future. It would guide the kingdom, now free of its false king, toward a new dawn. A dawn where power was not held by the throne, but by the will of the land itself. For the first time in his life, Kalen felt the crownless truth settle within him. He was the ruler of Werndale, not because he had taken power, but because he had let go of it, and the kingdom would rise, reborn.